Hello, welcome to Meeplecare. My name is Nicolas and today I would like to show you how to set up and play Atlantis. Atlantis is a game for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, that plays in about 90 minutes. It's published by DLP Games. Now before we go to the island of Atlantis, I would kindly ask you to hit the like and subscribe button. Welcome to Atlantis. There are many stories and myths that feature this legendary island that was reputed to have completely drowned in only one night. It is your job as one of the kings of Atlantis to rescue as many citizens as possible before the impending downfall. Meanwhile, you want to save the knowledge that your civilization has acquired for a different world and time. You have 5 years to complete this difficult task. Each year presents you with new challenges under constantly changing conditions. The king who does this the best wins the game and is crowned as the heroic king. The game is played over a period of 5 years, and at the beginning of each year you determine the player order. During each year you will play 3 rounds, and each round consists of 2 phases. During the first phase, each player will in turn order place their king on a vacant spot on the board on the inner ring. During the second round you will move your king to the middle ring, and during the third round you will move him to the outer ring. Immediately after you end your move on a space, you receive the bonus shown there, and you might be able to pick up a guard or a tile to place on your board. During the second phase of a round, again in player order, you may perform up to 2 actions. You can train settlers, you can send them away to gain bonuses, you can acquire knowledge, use your influence, or you can advance along the apotheosis track. Of course, I will show you this in more detail during the rules explanation. After the end of the second, the fourth and the 5th year, there is a settlement scoring. At the end of the 5th year, this is followed by a final score to determine the winner of the game. There are a few adjustments for playing a 2-player game and a solo game, but I'll explain these at the end of the video. Now, before I can teach you how to play, let's first start by setting up the game, and in the meantime, I can explain the basic concepts of all the pieces. Take the Atlantis city rondel and place it in the middle of the table. Make sure that you align the 2 discs of the rondel in such a way that the cogwheels on them connect with each other at the edges. Then place the 4 island sections around the rondel to create the island. These are the pillars of remembrance cards. When gaining these cards, they will give you an immediate one-time bonus and an effect that you may use once per round. When you sort them according to their back, you will have a deck of pedestal cards, body and capital cards. Shuffle each deck and place these face down on the table next to the board in the correct location to create a pillar. You then reveal 2 cards of each deck and place these in the marked position next to the board. The influence cards all have this back. During the game, you can play an influence card to trigger a one-time special effect. Shuffle this deck of cards and you place it face down next to the game board. Take the year token and place it at the start of this year track. To make it easy to follow everything on camera, I will just use this part of the token. You then mix these catastrophe tiles and you place 1 face down on each of the empty spaces of this track. You can then place all the other tiles back into the box. Next up are these knowledge cards. They all have the same back. They will give you extra scoring options during final scoring. When playing a 2-player or a solo game, you will first have to remove all the knowledge cards that have a 3+ player symbol. You would then shuffle these cards and you would place them in a face down deck in the corresponding space next to the board. You now reveal a number of these cards according to the number of players in the game. For a 2-player or a solo game, you would reveal 3 cards. For a 3-player game, you would reveal 4, and in a 4-player game you would reveal 5 cards. Since this is a 3-player game, we will reveal 4 of these cards. Now it's time to fill this cloth bag with the settlers of Atlantis. There are 3 types of settlers. You have workers, intellectuals, and scientists. In a 1 or 2-player game, you fill the bag with 20 settlers of each color. In our 3-player game, we will use 30 of each color, and in a 4-player game, you would use 40 of each color. On the city board, you see these spaces that have a settler symbol. Draw and place a settler on each of these symbols. The settlers that you have placed on these pillar symbols are called guardians. During the game, you will gain buildings and ship tiles that you can place on your player board to create your part of Atlantis and claim bonuses. You can collect workshops, agora and ship tiles, residence tiles, and monument tiles. You can recognize each tile by their specific shape and picture. You will activate workshops by placing 1 or more settlers on them to take the bonus of the tile. When you place an agora tile on your board, you gain a bonus or an already trained settler. Placing ship tiles on your board can score you points. More on that, of course, later during the explanation. Now shuffle these 3 types of tiles and place them face down next to the game board. If you look at the city rondel, you will notice that there are some spots reserved on the board that will match with these tiles. So on these I can put the matching workshop tiles. Here I can put ship tiles. And these spots resemble with the agora tiles. I would now place 1 of the matching tiles on each of these spots. Building residences will give your settlers a home. Shuffle the resident tiles and place them in a face-down stack. You would then place 3 resident tiles face up next to that stack. Each monument that you build can score you extra points at the end of the game if you meet the monument's requirements. Shuffle these tiles and place 1 face down on each available spot on the apotheosis track. There are 2 spots on the track where you can place 4 of these monuments. Now turn all placed monuments face up and place the rest of the monuments back into the box. Place the gold coins and the favor tiles next to the board. Collecting these favor tiles will allow you to take extra actions during your turn. Sort the reference books according to color. We have craft, culture, and science reference books. Place these within reach of all players. To make some room to show you how player setup is done, I will move these components off to the side. Each player gets a player board and then chooses a color. Let's set up the pieces for the red player. You would take your order token, your king, your high priest, your score marker, and a 100-point victory point token in your color. As your starting resources, you now collect 1 gold coin and 1 of each type of reference book. Now each player places their high priest on the 0 spot of this apotheosis track, and each player places their score marker on the 0 space of the score track. To finish setup, the youngest player, and let's presume that it's the red player, will now place his order token on the first space of this sorting track. In clockwise order, the next player takes the next space on the sorting track, and the third player in turn order takes the third place on this sorting track. It's already worth noting that this is the sorting track and this is the turn order track. So now that setup is finished, I can finally show you how to play. As I already told you, the game is played over a period of 5 years. Each year starts with determining the player order and is then played over 3 rounds. Each round has 2 phases. During the first phase, you will place your king on the city rondel and take any bonuses that are there. And during the second phase, you will take actions. Let's take a look at each of these parts in detail and start by determining the player order for the first year. During setup, each player plays their order token on a spot of this sorting track. At the start of each year, you will move your order token from the sorting track to a spot on the order track. This is the track that has the Roman numbers. Starting with the player on the first spot of this sorting track, you take your token and you move it to a spot on the order track of your choice. If there's a bonus on that spot, you get that bonus immediately. And this will also determine the order that players will take during the coming year. So, the first player on the sorting track is the red player. He could move his order token to the third place on this order track. This place shows us the book bonus. When he places his marker here, he can choose one of the 3 reference books and place it into his inventory. And it will also mean that during the next year he will be third in the round. The second player moves his marker to this space. He now will be the second player in turn order, and as a bonus he gets this benefit. This symbol means that he may now move his high priest one spot along this apotheosis track. So the green player would move his priest one space. And then he would place his turn order token on the second spot of this order track. The third player wants to start first this year, so he moves his turn order token to the first spot of the turn order track. He will be the starting player during this year, but he will not gain a specific benefit. This fourth spot on the order track also gives you a coin, and you can only use the fifth space on the order track if you are playing a 4-player game. This will not give you an immediate bonus, but it does give you a benefit during the game. In a minute, I will show you how to place your king on the city rondel. Normally, you can only place him on a vacant space without another player's king. If, however, you chose to go last in turn order in a 4-player game, you get the benefit of placing your king on a space that already has another player's king on it. With that out of the way, we now know the turn order for this year and we can start round 1 of year 1. As I told you before, each year consists of 3 rounds and each round consists of 2 phases. Let's take a look at phase 1, in which you will place your king on a vacant spot on the inner circle. This is the inner circle, this is the middle circle, and this is the outer circle. A vacant space is a space without another player's king. When you place your king on a vacant spot, you immediately receive the bonus shown there. If on your space there is not only a benefit, but there is also settlers or tiles, you can also take those when you go to that space. Keep in mind that during a 4-player game, when a player has unlocked this benefit, he could also move his king to a space that already has another player's king, and he would be able to take the same bonuses that are depicted on that space. But if there were any settlers or tiles on that same space, he would only be able to take any settlers or tiles if the previous king didn't take them. In a minute, I will show you what all these bonuses mean, but now it's important to show you that each round we will move the king to another circle. During the first phase of the second round, you will move your king to a space on the middle circle, and during the first phase of the third round, you will move your king to a space on the outer ring. If you move your king from the inner ring to the middle ring and later to the outer ring, you may only move him to spaces that are within reach. This means that you may not move your king through contiguous walls, and you may move through a space that already has a king, as long as you don't end your movement on that space. Let me show you with an example how this would work. During phase 1 of the first round, the green player placed their king on this space of the inner ring. It's now the first phase of the second round, and the blue player has already moved his king from this space to this space on the middle ring. The green player looks at his options to move to the middle ring, bearing in mind that he may not move through walls, and he may not end his movement on a space where there's already a king. If you look closely, you can see that this space is connected to these two spaces and these two spaces, because he cannot move on the inner ring because of these two walls, and he cannot go further than the two walls behind these two spaces. So maybe the green player decides to move his king through this space with the king, which he is allowed to do, to this space. The same rules would apply when during phase 1 of the third round he would move his king to the outer ring. Again, we have one wall here and one wall here, so he could move to this space, and he can also move to this and this space. So he might decide to move past this king to the outer ring and then end his turn here and place this king here to gain this bonus. Speaking of a bonus, let's take a closer look at all the bonuses that you can take when you end your turn on a space. A lot of spaces allow you to take something and add it to your player board or your supply. You can gather coins, books, favor tiles, ship tokens, building tokens, or perform special actions. Let's start by looking at the resources. Whenever you see a resource symbol on your space, you take the amount of that resource type shown from the supply and place those into your inventory. Here you can take 3 coins. Here you can take 3 purple books. If you see this book symbol, it means that you're allowed to choose one of the 3 colors of reference books and place it into your supply. A lot of bonuses that you gain don't make it into your reserve, but are placed on your player board. So now might be a good time to visit your player board. This is your player board. On it you have 4 major areas. You have a training area, a ship track, a place to store your favor tokens, and a settlement area. Let's begin with this training area. When you look at the training area on your player board, you will notice that there's a region for each of the 3 types of settlers to train on your board. There's a region for the scientists to train, the intellectuals, and the workers. Whenever you gain a settler from the Atlantis board, you will place it at the top of its matching training area. Any number of settlers can be placed in each space of this training area. You can gain settlers by placing your king on a space that has settlers on it. So here, if I place my king on this space, I would not only gain a brown reference book, but I'm also allowed to take these 2 settlers and place them on their matching spot in my training area. Another way to gain a settler is when you end your movement on a space next to one of these guards. Again, if this happens, you're allowed to take the settler and place it on its matching space in the training area. If you ever see this symbol, it means that you can now draw that number of settlers from the back and add them to their training area. During my explanation of phase 2, I will show you how to train your settlers and send them away on missions to score you points and benefits. Maybe already a quick warning, it might not always be a good idea to take all the settlers that you can, because at the end of the game, each settler that is still in your training area will lose you 3 points. Next up is the ship track. You can gain a ship token through spaces in Atlantis by placing your king on a space that has a ship token, or later during phase 2, you can send away a counselor or play an influence card that has this ship symbol. Whenever you gain a ship token, you place it on the leftmost open space of this track and you immediately score these points that are pictured on that space. So here I already have a turtle ship. By placing this bird ship on this second spot, it would now score me 2 points. However, you have to watch out because you can only take the victory points by placing a token of a type that you don't already have. So if during a later turn I collect another one of these turtle ships, I can place it here on this next space next to my other ships, but I will not be able to score 3 points. During the second phase of a round, you will be able to send settlers away to a ship, but more on that again later. Underneath the ship track, in the bottom left corner, you can see the area where you can store any favor tiles that you gain during the game. You can gain these favor tiles by placing your king on a space that shows you the favor tile symbol, or later during phase 2 when you place an influence card that has the favor tile symbols on it. You can store up to 4 favor tokens in this area of your board. The first space can always be occupied. To store a second, a third or a fourth tile, you must have the appropriate amount of buildings in your settlement area. I will show you in a minute how you add buildings to your board, but as soon as you have built 3 buildings, you unlock a spot to store a second favor tile. Building 6 buildings unlocks a spot for a third favor tile. And as soon as you have placed 9 buildings in your settlement area, you can store up to 4 favor tokens. If you would gain a favor token, but you don't have a place to store it, you lose the token. During phase 2 of a round, you can always trade in any number of these favor tiles to take an extra action for each of those tiles that you return to the supply. Now you do need a place to build all the building tiles that you gain during the game. These buildings will be placed in your settlement area. You can gain buildings by moving your king to a space with a building, or during phase 2 by playing a card that shows you a building symbol, or maybe by sending away a builder so you could gain a workshop. The settlement area where you will place your buildings is divided into 3 main areas. You have North Africa, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. During the settlement scoring, you will score these regions, but more on that later. The building tiles that you can place in your settlement area are residences, workshops, monuments, and agoras. As you can see, each type of building has its own specific shape, and when you take a closer look at the spaces in your settlement area, you will notice that 3 of them match the shape of an agora tile. This means that you can only place an agora tile on one of these 3 spaces. No other buildings can be placed on those spaces. On the other spots you can place any of the other buildings except an agora tile. When placing a building into your settlement area, you don't have to follow a specific order, although, as you will see when we take a look at the end of the round and the final scoring phase, placing a building in a certain spot will help you to score more points. Nevertheless, the moment when you place a building on a space in your settlement area, you will immediately receive the bonus that you cover. This way you would be able to gain coins, books, favor tiles, or collect new settlers from the bag. The flames would allow you to move your high priest that amount of spaces along the apotheosis track. If you look closely at all the building tiles, you might notice that each building is built on a specific color of ground. There are 5 types of ground that the building can be placed on. At the end of the game, you will be able to score points depending on the ground color of your building tiles. For example, this monument scores you 2 points at the end of the game for each green ground building that you have. So right now I have 1 building that is built on green ground, and this would score me 2 points. I will come back and explain these buildings in a bit more detail when we take a look at phase 2. So you now know where you can place your books, your settlers, coins, favor tokens, ship tokens, and where you can place your building tiles. This leaves us with 4 bonuses that require some more explanation. Let's start with these guards. I've already shown you that when you end your movement with your king on a space that is next to a guard on one of these pillars, you may then take, but you don't have to, that settler and place it in the matching training area near your player board. Each time when you end your movement on a space with these flame symbols, you're allowed to move your high priest that amount of spaces on the apotheosis track. So here the blue player can move his high priest 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. You can consider this track as being a wheel of bonuses. Each time when you move through or end your movement on a space with a bonus, you can claim it. If you move several spaces, you will first move your High Priest, and then you resolve each bonus in the order in which you get them. Most of these symbols you already know. You can gain points, favor tokens, coins, books, and this is the symbol for influence cards. Whenever you are allowed to take an influence card, you can choose one of the cards that are in the face-up display, or you can take the two topmost influence cards from the face-down deck. You choose one to keep and place it face down next to your player board. You then add the other card to the face-up display. As I've already shown you, during phase 2, you will be able to play these influence cards to gain the one-time benefit. Spaces 15 and 31 of this track each hold 4 monuments. When you arrive or move through space 15 or 31, you're entitled to pick one of these 4 monuments. Each of these monuments will provide you with a benefit at the end of the game during the final scoring. You take the monument that you want to keep and you place it in your settlement area, unlocking any bonuses that you cover up. At the end of the game, we can take a closer look at some of these extra scoring options. If you end your movement on a space with one of the 2 pillars of remembrance symbols, being the snake and the owl, you can then take a card from the column that matches that symbol. If you would gain a card any other way, you can choose to take a card from either of these 2 columns. The idea is that you will build a pillar in front of you. That pillar will always consist of 3 parts. Of course, you will have to place a pedestal part first before you can add a body or a capital card to your pillar. Each part of your pillar has an immediate one-time bonus that you get when you place that part in front of you, and it also has an effect that can be activated once per round during phase 2 of the round. The pedestal part is considered to be completed straight away. To be able to use the effect of the body or a capital card, you will first have to place a matching settler on it. But more on that during the phase 2 explanation. For each new extra pillar card that you are allowed to take, you can choose to either start a new pillar in your play area, or you can continue building an existing pillar. You can have a maximum of 3 pillars in your play area. So this was the explanation for phase 1 of a round. Each player, in turn order, has placed or moved his king to a vacant space on the Atlantis board, taking any available bonuses of that space. During this explanation, I have referred to phase 2 of the game quite a lot. So let's move on to phase 2, the action phase. During phase 2, again, in turn order, each player is allowed to perform 2 actions. If you have already claimed one or more of these favor tiles, you can now trade them in to take extra actions. You can choose the order in which you take your actions, and you are allowed to take the same action multiple times. Additionally, you can carry out the effect of your pillars of remembrance. But let me first show you the basic actions that you can choose from. These are advancing 1 step along the apotheosis track. You can train a settler. You can send a settler away. You can take a knowledge card, or you can play an influence card. The first of these actions you already know. This action to advance along the apotheosis track is the same action that you perform when you gain this flame symbol bonus. So you move your priest 1 space along the track and you gain any bonuses that are shown. During phase 1, you might have already gained a few settlers in your training area. So let's see how you can train them. Each settler starts at the top space of their matching column. As an action, you can train a settler. To do this, you have to choose one of the 3 professions that you can train him in that are directly below this top spot. So here I can choose to train an intellectual to become a priest, a scholar, or a counselor. The cost to train him is noted in this arrow that is pointing at a new profession. So to train this intellectual to become a priest, I would have to pay 2 white reference books. And then I can move this intellectual to the priest space. The same way, you can move an already trained settler to another profession, following the arrow. To train this priest to become an oracle, this would cost me 3 white reference books and a gold coin, and I can then place him on this oracle spot. Underneath each profession, you can find a number of bonus symbols next to this compass symbol. This is the reward that you get when you send a settler with that profession away. And that is what you can do as another possible action. It's all good and well to invite and train these settlers, but you have to send them away before the end of the game. This will not only help you to score points, but will also prevent you from losing points, because each settler that is still in your training area at the end of the game will lose you 3 points. You can send each worker in your training area away, even if they haven't received any training yet. They would still give you a bonus, a point, a move on the apotheosis track, or a point. To send them away, you simply take the worker and you gain the bonus of the space that he leaves. You then place your settler on a location. Let's see where they can end up. There's one type of building that you can't get from the Atlantis board, and that's the resident building. If you send a settler away, you can send him away to a residence. Each residence has room for 3 or 5 settlers. And just like all buildings, each residence is built on one of the 5 ground colors. If you don't have a residence, at the moment when you want to send a settler away, you first take one from the open display and you place it in your settlement area, gaining any bonuses from the space that you cover up. Taking a residence is not considered an action, as it's part of the sending a settler away action. As such, you are not allowed to place a residence without sending a settler away, and, very important, you always have to completely fill a residence before you can take a new one. So once you have placed the residence inside your settlement area, you can then place the settler that you send away on a space of the residence. Each time when you take a residence tile from the display, you immediately reveal a new one and place it along the other 2 buildings. So there will always be 3 residences in the display. You are not allowed to take a residence tile from the face down pile. You can also send a settler away to one of your ships. Each ship has room for 1 settler. Don't forget to take the bonus of the space that you leave in the training area. Here it would give you 1 point. As you can see, already 2 of the settlers have left my training area and they will not lose me any points at the end of the game. If you have built a workshop in your settlement area, you can send a settler to that workshop. However, you can't choose who you send to a workshop, because each workshop has a bonus that you can claim when you activate them with a matching settler. Some workshops need a specifically trained settler. This workshop needs a farmer. You can recognize the symbol. So I can only send a farmer away to this spot. Other workshops are less picky. Here I can activate the bonus of this workshop by sending away any white or brown settler to activate the workshop. From that moment on, the ability for that workshop has been activated. Here, each time when I gain a purple settler from the Atlantis board, I can also gain 1 purple reference book. And for this workshop, each time when I take another workshop from the Atlantis board, I also gain a coin. You might gain workshops when ending your movement with your king on a space that has a workshop tile. But you can also gain a workshop when you play an influence card with a workshop symbol, or whenever you send away a builder, you can also take a workshop tile. If you gain a workshop in this way, you either take 1 from the open display, or you draw 2 workshop tiles from the face down pile, You pick one to keep and you discard the other one face up in this display. Of course, then you're allowed to place the workshop that you gained into your settlement area and gain any bonuses that you cover up. The last space that you can send a settler to are some of your pillar cards. The body and the capital cards of your pillar require a specific trained settler to get activated. If you want to activate a body card, you need this scholar. So you will have to send the scholar away to that card to activate it. To activate a capital card, you will need a philosopher. So you can send this philosopher away. You gain 4 points and 2 movement on the apotheosis track, and then you can place him on this capital card to activate it. Just like when you place settlers on a ship, residence tile or workshop, they will stay there for the rest of the game, so these cards keep activated until the end of the game. As you already know, a pedestal card is always activated. And now for this first pillar, this means there are no settlers here, so only the pedestal card is activated. For this second pillar, the pedestal and the body card is activated. And for this last pillar, the pedestal card, the body and the capital card are activated. Now what does this mean for you? Once per round, during the second phase of the round, you may carry out the effect of one tier of each of your pillars. It doesn't matter if one hasn't been completely built. Each pillar consists of 3 tiers. You have the pedestal tier, the body tier and the capital tier. For my first pillar, I could only activate the pedestal tier because these cards are not yet activated by a settler. So here I can exchange 2 identical books for a coin or pay a coin to gain 2 identical books. For my second pillar, I can choose. I can either activate this body card to get one of the 3 kinds of books, or I can activate this pedestal and lose a point to gain a book of one of the 3 types or move a spot on the apotheosis track. If I choose to activate a tier with the capital card, as you can see, I can activate both the pedestal card and the body card, and I can choose the order in which I will execute them. Meaning I can move a spot along the apotheosis track and I can exchange a book for a point or an extra move on the apotheosis track. If this other type of capital card would have been activated, it would allow me to perform the action of the pedestal card 2 times or the action of the body card 2 times. Now before we take a look at the last 2 actions that you can take, I have a very important rule to share with you regarding sending workers away. If you ever place a workshop in your settlement area that requires a specific trained settler, and you already have that settler in your training area, you can place the settler on the workshop as part of the placement, so you don't have to spend an action to send him to that tile. So here, this workshop requires a farmer. I already have a farmer that's trained. I can now, when I place this workshop in my settlement area, immediately place this settler, this farmer, onto that tile. If a workshop requires 2 colors of settlers, again, if you have them already in your training area, you can immediately take those settlers and place them on the workshop. The same is true for these pillars of remembrance. If I add a body card to one of those pillars, and I already have a scholar in my training area, again, I'm allowed to move that scholar directly to the card, as part of the action of me placing the pillar card there. Of course, if you don't have that specific settler at the moment of placing your card or your tile, you can always do this during a later turn, but then again you will have to spend an action to do so. That being said, it's time to take a look at the last 2 actions that you can take on your turn during phase 2. They both involve cards. As an action, you can claim a knowledge card from the display. If we take a look at the knowledge card, you will see that it has a settler requirement printed on it. Let's see if we can claim this card. If you want to claim a card and place it next to your board, you must have those trained settlers in your training area. This card requires a mathematician and an astronomer, and those I have in my training area. So I can claim the card, but immediately after you have claimed such a card, You also have to be able to send those settlers away that you used to claim the card. All these knowledge cards can score you additional victory points during the final scoring. For example, this card will score me 1 point for each 6 spaces that I have moved along the apotheosis track. And this card will score me 3 points for every 2 coins that I have left at the end of the game. One of the rewards of the apotheosis track is taking an influence card. As an action during phase 2, you may play an influence card from your hand. These cards provide you with a one-time special effect. For example, playing this card would score me 3 points. Playing this card would allow me to gain a knowledge card. You may have several of these cards that you keep near your player board, and at the end of the game you gain 1 point for every unused influence card that you still have. Now you know all the actions that you can take during phase 2 of your turn. There are 2 more buildings left that we can look at in some more detail. First up are the agora tiles. You gain these agora tiles either through spaces in Atlantis or by playing an influence card. In case of the influence card, you either take 1 from the open display or you draw 2 from the face down pile, pick 1 to keep and discard the other one face up into the display. Some agora tiles give you resources that you can claim immediately when you build the building. Here I would get a purple, a white and a brown reference book when I build this agora tile. If however you gain or take an agora tile showing you a settler, you randomly draw 1 from the bag and you place him in your training area according to the information on the tile. The tile shows you the 3 colors of settlers that you can have, and it also shows you a symbol of that training area. So if I draw a white settler, it immediately turns into an oracle, because this is the matching symbol in the training area. At that moment I can immediately place this settler on the oracle space. You already know that these are the buildings that have a specific matching place in your settlement area. So this also means that you can never have more than 3 agora tiles in your settlement area. The last building we are going to look at in detail are these monuments. These are obtained when passing through or ending your High Priest's movement on spaces 15 or 31 of the apotheosis track. These monuments provide you with extra scoring possibilities at the end of the game. You already saw this one during the explanation. It would give you 2 points for each building with a green ground color. This one would score you 3 points for each row where you have at least 3 buildings with a different ground color, like you see here. So as a final recap, there are 5 years in each game, and each year lasts 3 rounds. Each round has 2 phases. In the first phase, in turn order, each player moves their king on the Atlantis board, and in the second phase, each player, again in turn order, takes 2 actions. Once you have played 3 rounds, the year has ended. At the end of year 1 to 4, you will prepare for the next round. At the end of the second, the fourth and the 5th year, there is also a settlement scoring for each of the 3 regions. During the 5th year, this settlement scoring is followed by a final scoring. But before we take a look at scoring, let's see how we prepare the board for a new year. To do this, you take the following steps. First, all players take their king back from the Atlantis board and place him next to their playing area. You then take the year token and advance it 1 space along this year track. When you do this, you remove this catastrophe tile and you reveal it. Each catastrophe tile will show you how many times you will have to turn the city rondel levels. 1 turn is 90 degrees. You start with the middle circle and then you turn the inner circle. So here I would turn the middle circle 1 time, 90 degrees, and the inner circle 2 times. You also notice that when you turn the middle circle, the inner circle also turns. Just make sure that at the end of the rotation, the cogwheels on the board align. Now you remove all ship workshop and agora tiles that are still left on the board, and you place them next to the board in a face-up display. This way, players can also choose from these tiles during the next year. You will then refill all the buildings and ship tiles with new tiles from the face-down stack. Next, you refill all the spaces that require settlers by drawing random settlers from the back. Reveal 2 new cards for each tier of the Pillars of Remembrance. It doesn't matter if there are still cards left from the previous year, you just place the new cards on top of the previous cards. Now let's deal with the knowledge cards. If there is a card still lying on the last space of the track, you put it into a face-up discard pile. You would then move all cards to the right, so the leftmost spaces become open. You then refill those spaces with a new knowledge card depending on your player count. As a last step in preparation, you will move the player's order tokens from the order track back to the sorting track. But you will do this contrary to the player order. So the last player in turn order will become the first player on the sorting track, and the first player on the order track will become the last player on the sorting track. During a settlement scoring that takes place at the end of the 2nd, the 4th and the 5th year, you will get points for settlers that you have placed on tiles in that region that is being scored, and always also on ships. After year 2, you count the score for settlers placed in North Africa and on ships. After year 4, you count the settlers in the Mesopotamian area and on ships. And during the final settlement score, you will look at settlers placed in the Mesoamerica area and also on your ships. Now, how do you count these points? You will look at each type of worker and count how many of those workers you have on your board in that area and on your ships. And then, depending on the player count, you will get points for each player that has less of that color than you have. We are playing a 3-player game, so each player that has less of a color than me would score me 3 points. Let's take a look at how this would work by performing a settlement score as if we were at the end of the 2nd year. It's the end of the 2nd year, so we would count the North Africa region and the ships. Let's start with the white settlers. Red has 2 white settlers, green has 3 white settlers, and blue has 1 white settler. Green has the most, so now for each player that has less white settlers than him, he would score 3 points, so he gains 6 points. Red has more white settlers than blue, so he would gain 3 points. Next up are the purple settlers. Red has 1, green has 2, but blue has 3 purple settlers. So blue would score 6 points because there are 2 players with less purple settlers than him. And green would score 3 points because there is 1 player that has less purple settlers than him. Last up are the brown settlers, of which blue has 2, but both green and red only have 1 brown worker. So blue scores 6 points because there are 2 players with less brown settlers than him, but red and green would not score points for any brown settlers. As mentioned before, this settlement scoring is followed by a final scoring at the end of the 5th year. You can see how this works on your reference card. You would first remove all the settlers that are left in your training area. Each settler that you remove in this way will cost you 3 points. So here I would lose 6 points. You then earn 2 victory points for eachly completely built row and 1 point for eachly completely built column. So here I would score 3 points. 2 for the row and 1 for this column. You now add up any points that you would gain from monuments that you've built. Here I would score 2 points for each building that's built on a green ground. Next up, you score all the knowledge cards that are face up in front of you. This card would score me 6 points for these 4 coins that I have left, and this card would score me 1 point for these 2 books. And last but not least, you score 1 victory point for each unused influence card. The player with the most points is the winner of the game. In case of a tie, the player who has been able to save the most settlers is the winner. And if there would still be a tie, the tied players share the victory. Now, before I let you save the people and knowledge from Atlantis, I promised you to take a look at the modifications for a 2-player game and the solo version of the game. If playing with 2 players, you block some spaces on the city rondel to narrow down the choices. To do this, you take the 2 leftover kings and you place them as neutral figures on the spaces of Atlantis that show the favor tiles. There is one on the middle ring, that's right over here, and there's another one on the outer ring. These are the spaces that are blocked during the first year, and as such they are no longer vacant. At the end of each year, when you turn the rings, you also move the kings. You move the king on the middle ring as many spaces as the inner ring. So here you would move him 2 spaces. And you move the king on the outer ring as many spaces as you move the middle ring. So that would be 1. For the 2-player game, you will also, during setup, only place 3 monuments on each of these spaces on the apotheosis track. And you would remove all knowledge cards that have the 3+ player symbol. For the solo variant, you use the same rules that also apply to the 2-player game, but you also add the following modifications. Place your order token on the first space of the order track for the entire game. This means that you will never gain any bonuses from a space on the order track. During the preparations after year 1, 2, 3 and 4, you don't refill the guard spots. They remain empty for the rest of the game once a guard is taken. Clearing away and refilling the board with agoras, workshops, ships and settlers on the inner ring only happens after the 2nd and the 4th year. For settlement scoring, some special rules apply. So let's presume that this is again the end of the 2nd year and we are performing the settlement scoring for North Africa. First up, you need to have at least 1 residence in the region that you are scoring. Otherwise, you lose immediately. To score, you count as follows. If you have only settlers of 1 or 2 kinds, like here, I only have purple and white settlers in this region and on my ships, you score 1 point for each settler, so that's 3 points. If, however, you have settlers of all 3 kinds, you would score 3 points for each settler of which you have the least. So here I have 2 brown and 2 white settlers and 1 purple. 1 purple is the least, so I score 3 points. For the other 2 settler types, I score 1 point. So here this would score me 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. When you're done calculating your score for the solo game, you can check your score with the list in the manual to see how well you did. This is all you need to know to set up and play Atlantis. If you like this video, please click the like and subscribe button, and you can always follow Meeplecare on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. This was Meeplecare, taking care of your meeple needs.